so now we're on to book 10, Paradise Lost. A few notes at the end of book 9. These two books are so jam-packed with stuff. They're both over, well over 1,000 lines. Book 10 and book 9, really tough to get to in 3 podcasts. I think there are a few things that are interesting. At the end of book 9, Milton doesn't even delve into the idea that Eden may not be a paradise, solely based on the fact that someone you love can eat from the tree. So for some reason it seems like myopic. You look at eating from the forbidden fruit as attending the fall of man. But one person can do it. What if Adam hadn't eaten? The moment she ate, Adam, you could argue, had been deprived of paradise because he was faced with the scruple of having his wife killed and then living forever in Eden without her, or dying at her side. He was faced with that scruple. How could it be Eden within those parameters? That's something that Milton doesn't even consider. What if they had children? What happens if they eat from the tree? So it's a paradise except for the pit of death, right? Except for the poisonous fruit. You eat it, you die. Okay, so book 9 ends with the first couple. Finally, they feel the shame of their nakedness, and it ends with them engaging in a very bitter argument over their downfall, and neither one of them wants to take the blame. They blame the other, and they have their first true fight, between the two of them. And for all we know, it's possible that at this moment Eve could be pregnant with their first son, Cain. But meanwhile, across the realm of chaos, 2 entities have felt the fall: sin and death. And we had talked about the fact that the fall was felt. They felt it everywhere. They felt it across the universe. They even felt it in hell. Line 230, within the gates of hell sat sin and death in counterview within the gates, and now stood wide open. I kind of love this line. Like, hell is open for business. The gates of hell are wide open, and hell is belching an outrageous flame far into chaos, which is something that Milton really likes to do. He likes to give kind of a biological description of something that's not alive. So sin is sitting there with her serpent body, shadowy death with his stinger, and they're waiting for orders they're waiting for their master to return, their father to return. And sin has felt the fall of man. She says in line 243, "Methinks I feel new strength within me rise, wings growing and dominion given me," she says. So she has been empowered. She's getting a little stir crazy. So she and death build a bridge from earth to hell. And death agrees. He felt the fall too. Line 267, "Such a scent I draw of carnage, prey innumerable, and taste the savor of death." That's death talking. So we can just kind of picture these 2 evil entities, can't wait to get a bite out of mankind. But we get kind of a new motif from Milton here. So this is still death talking. "With delight he snuffed the smell of mortal change on earth." So now snuff, as we know, it's a type of inhalable tobacco that they had back in the day. And so I think to liken this smell to snuff, I think Milton is somewhat likening death's hunger a little bit to the concept of addiction, to a concept of overindulgence and the earth's inability to provide for your urges in abundance. And I really do think he did this on purpose. You got to recall that remember Adam, after he had eaten from the tree and he suddenly realized he was able to look at Eve with a true sense of mortal carnality for the first time. And he wished that for every tree there had been 10. He wished for 10 more trees. That's addictive language. 1 is good, 10 is better. Very addictive language. And I think that into this part of the poem, Milton has kind of introduced a new concept of insatiability after the fall. So sin and death leave the gates of hell together, and they build this bridge. And I don't know, for me, this is almost like you could write an 80s metal song to this. Sin and death building a bridge across the plane of chaos. So anyway, they build this bridge, and the bridge actually leads. I think the bridge leads to heaven, and it leads to earth, and apparently it's got exit ramps and everything. And all right, so when they get to Earth, they see Satan rising in angelic form. And Milton makes another astrological reference here, saying that the sun is in Aries as Satan rises. So it sort of suggests that Satan's powers are at his zenith between Scorpio and Sagittarius, because this is all in line 328. So there's a sense of a cycle. Milton makes this kind of allusion in other places in the poem, the idea of this, where the sun is, where the moon is. He's clearly read his astrology. So listen to how Sin greets him. Line 368, thou hast achieved our liberty. Sin, by the way, Sin is pumped. Sin is ready to go. So this is Satan's triumph, and this reminds of Prometheus Bound and the Iliad, because Guile has won the day. In the face of supreme force, Guile has won. This is the horse has entered the city, and the Greeks have poured out and conquered the city of Troy. Guile has won the day. Sin keeps talking to him. Thy wisdom gained with odds what war hath lost, and fully avenged our foil in heaven. So here she's saying, what we couldn't accomplish through arms, we have accomplished through guile. And when she finishes speaking, now Milton finally refers to Satan as the Prince of Darkness. The Prince of Darkness answers her glad. And listen to this pep talk he gives them. He tells them he's going to continue on to hell, but he tells them, down to paradise descend, there to dwell and reign in bliss, thence on earth dominion exercise, and in the air, chiefly on man, sole lord of all declared. Him first, make sure your thrall, and lastly kill. Okay, so he means corrupt them, then kill them. Make sure they're going to be coming to join us in hell, and then kill them. Line 405, on your joint vigor, he's talking to sin and death. On your joint vigor, now my hold of this new kingdom all depends, through sin to death exposed by my exploit. If your joint power prevail, the affairs of hell no detriment need fear. Go and be strong. That's how it closes. Go and be strong. How he closes his pep talk. So he returns dramatically to his seat on the throne of hell, pretending to be a low-ranking angel. He wants to make this dramatic entrance, so he sort of inconspicuously assumes the throne as a low-ranking angel, and then he suddenly transforms physically into the Satan that they know. Milton loves these transformations. We have seen these. We saw Milton on the slopes of the mountain, brooding over his decision to rebel against God, and his figure changes shape. We saw the Son of God before he drove the rebel angels into the Gulf of Tartarus, into hell. He changed shape into a sight so terrible to be described, terrible to see. And here we go, another transformation. He transforms, and it really is an amazing thing to read what this 17th century writer imagined to be Satan's words for his demon hordes returning from the Garden of Eden, and how terrifying this should be. The road is open, Satan proclaims to them. He has won. Line 461, he says they are in possession of right. Those are his words. Right is on their side. They still think they are on the right side. So he invites them all to go, rule on earth. And regarding mankind, line 485, him by fraud I have seduced from his creator. And Satan mocks Eden. He thinks it was all a great big joke. And here's what he says to them. The more to increase your wonder, with an apple he thereat offended. Worth your laughter, Satan says. He's like, get a load of this. All I had to do was get them to eat a fruit. Good. I couldn't wait to tell you all about it, demons. How ridiculous this God really is. He has forsaken them over a fruit. Line 488. God hath given up both his beloved man and all his world to sin and death, a prey. And so to us, without our hazard, labor, or alarm, to range in and to dwell, and over man to rule. This is what Satan says. God has given man up to us because of this ridiculous deception. But just when Satan is expecting this round of applause, all he hears is a hiss, and he himself transforms. Yet another physical transformation, and he turns into a serpent-like dragon. But this isn't permanent. By the way, they all turn into snakes, and they all start hissing. Right when he's supposed to get his commendation, his round of applause, all he hears is hissing, and they all descend into snakes and various serpentine animals. And Milton kind of says, on some days of the year, Satan and his demons will revert to the form of snakes. But most of the time, this isn't permanent. Don't worry about it. Not permanent. But back to sin and death. Sin's words on their arrival in this world are triumphant, all-conquering death. What thinkst thou of our empire now, though earned with travel difficult? Those are the triumphant words of sin, having gained entry. Ooh, it's nice here, are her first words. Sin's ready to go. She seems to delight in this whole situation. Sin assures death. Line 604. Feed first on the plants, then the beasts. And in the meantime, and this is line 607, till I, meaning her, sin, in man residing, through the race, his thoughts, his looks, words, actions all infect, and season him, thy last and sweetest prey. Sin is the seasoning on human beings for death, to savor our delicious iniquitous flesh. If we're talking about sin, death, and Satan in John Milton's Paradise Lost right now. So God sees all this, and his voice is heard from heaven to explain that this was no, quote, fit of passion. Milton's God sure sounds defensive sometimes. He blames mankind yet again, and here Milton's starting to get redundant. I get it. You knew what was going to happen, God. You saw it coming, and none of it is your fault. I mean, God seems to say this multiple times. It's getting old. Although he promises one day on line 636 to obstruct the mouth of hell forever. Eventually, there'll be a day of reckoning. But until then, yeah, sin and death, they're going to be there. This is the world you live in now. And then once he is done talking, what do you think happens? Yep, they sing his praises, and they jump for joy all over again. He's talking about the misery of mankind on earth, and the angels just start jumping for joy. It's pretty incredible. So it's kind of funny. Both heaven and hell are rejoicing over the fall. That's interesting. So after all this, after hearing God's voice, Adam goes off on a tirade, and he really does seem to question God's justice. Why, for example, why isn't the sentence of death carried out? That's what God had said he was going to do. And it seems weird for Adam to make this point, like, why didn't God kill us like he said? And Milton, unfortunately, is stuck with only Adam and Eve to make this point. I think he could have used a separate character to say this. God, why didn't you kill them? You said the punishment was death. They did the thing. Why didn't you kill them? Why did you delay justice? So this part is very confusing. But if you just realize that Milton has nobody else to make this argument of the delayed justice of God, this is Milton's best opportunity with the characters that are at his disposal. And so it sounds strange coming from Adam, but it's still an interesting point. God, you weren't true to your word. Why is he going to have to live out the rest of his life that he flawed his entire species? That's a lot of weight on your shoulders. And Adam wonders why mortal men must suffer an eternal sentence. Shouldn't the punishment be commensurate with the crime, is what he seems to wonder. Line 754, inexplicable thy justice seems, is what Adam says. Which kind of sounds a lot like something Job would say, I think. So now, at the end of this tirade, Adam gets, a little misogynistic. Milton and Adam, they start to say some things about women. All right, beginning line 888. Oh, why did God, creator wise, that peopled highest heaven with spirits masculine, create at last this novelty on earth, this fair defect of nature, and not fill the world at once with men as angels without feminine, or find some other way to generate mankind? This mischief had not befallen, and more that shall befall, innumerable disturbances on earth through female snares. Yeah, taking it out on women a little bit. But then he transitions into a different kind of hating women, and I think it's important to distinguish what he's about to say next from what he had just said, because I think there's kind of two kinds of ventilation against the opposite sex. There is a kind of real political, professional misogyny, which is a lot of what Adam had just said. Women they make their snares. But what comes next is a kind of romantic misogyny, a kind of romantic sexism that I think is a little bit more universal. Everyone who goes through the romantic process will have something to say about the opposite sex at some point. It's a little different than a political kind of misogyny. So the second half is very romantic. And Milton, you kind of wonder what's happened to Milton in his life. Adam complains with a lot of foresight about how men and women are going to interact in the future. He complains about things like, the happiest choice comes too late, he says sometimes, or the parents block the best marriage. And he itemizes a host of things that interfere with marital bliss. But when he's done, it looks like he is going to ditch Eve. But Eve throws herself at Adam's feet, and she says they should just kill themselves. She begs his forgiveness. She says, please don't bereave me. Please don't forsake me. And then she says, maybe they should just kill themselves. Why breed? The race is just going to be doomed. And at the prospect of suicide, here's what Adam says about suicide. Line 1025. That suicide will not exempt us from the pain we are by doomed to pay. Rather, such acts of contumacy will provoke the highest to make death in us live. Now, the word contumacy means a stubborn refusal to obey. So their refusal, so he's saying such an act of obstinance, basically, will provoke the highest. Well, that'll only provoke God even more if we try to get out of his punishment by killing ourselves. It's just an interesting line. What Milton thinks about life on earth, because that's a funny thing to remember reading this. This is how much they begrudge the possibility of a life outside of paradise. This is the world we live in. Eve is suggesting is not worth living. This is her contemplating killing herself before any of us could be born. A lot of weight should be attached to this line. It's quite a thing to say. Now, I talked about in one podcast about the frivolity of the labor in Eden. And this line seems to harken back to that. Because Adam says, you know what? This really isn't all that bad. And he pertaining to his, in the first part of this book, I had skipped this because everybody knows God had itemized, he had outlined what their punishment was. And that includes that Adam must labor in the soil and grow his food. But Adam is, now all of a sudden he's like, well, line 1054, with labor I must earn my bread. What harm? Idleness had been worse. Okay, that's the end of that quote. Now this line says, idleness had been worse. Now I think we're supposed to interject the word would here so that the sentence would say, idleness would have been worse. And I think the reason the word would is left out is to fit the meter. But who knows? It also could be saying the work in Eden sucked. That wasn't any fun. So I have to work now. I think that's fine. That's not a punishment. I'm fine having to grow crops. Line 1072, Adam conceives of making fire. By collision of two bodies, grind the air attrite to fire. Also, Adam has become a man before our eyes in these lines. In the last book, he was making a garland for his wife, while she was off being seduced by the devil, seduced into a decision which reflects a subtle statement from the first woman. Life in paradise with you alone is not enough for me. I want those angelic servants the devil promised. Now Adam has been hardened, and we find him contemplating the laborious, wintry existence of our northern prehistoric ancestors, huddling around fires, protecting themselves from predators in a wilderness yet to be trampled by progress, living in stone huts, their only possessions, those they made for themselves. Here is a new man in Adam, quietly contemplating the labor and sufferance of his future sons, a sufferance he's ready to accept in anticipation of the life ahead. He asks, what harm?